you. Please stand by.
Hi, everyone, and good afternoon. My name is Amanda Chu. I'm with CSRA, and I support the Better Buildings Home Upgrade Program Accelerator. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to today's webinar on assessing costs and results for home upgrade programs. Follow the money. Before we get started, let's go over some logistics. First, everyone except for the speakers are on mute to prevent background noise during the presentation. And if you haven't done so already, please follow the directions on the audio connection box that's popped up in the center of your screen. You can have WebEx dial you into our call, or you can call in yourself. If you do not see this box, you probably aren't listening, but you can hopefully see the slides. Go to Communicate on the top part of your menu and select Audio Connection, and then you can get the options to have WebEx call you or for you to call in. To see today's presentation, click on the second tab at the top of your WebEx screen, and it starts with my name, Amanda, right next to the Event Info tab. Let's see, we'll try to address any clarification questions during the presentation and save discussion for afterwards. To ask any questions, type it into the Q&A box on the right side of your screen. And lastly, we are recording today's presentation, and we'll share the recording and presentation in a PDF with you afterwards. Our speakers today are Dale Hoffmeyer and Mark Dyan. Dale Hoffmeyer is an Energy Technology Program Specialist at the U.S. Department of Energy. Since 2001, he has worked to accelerate home energy upgrades using an integrated building science approach to achieve peak energy performance. His experience started at the U.S. EPA's Energy Star program, developing an online home energy benchmarking application, where he eventually became a team leader. He continued his career at the U.S. Department of Energy, leading reporting and evaluation activities for the Better Buildings Neighborhood program through 2014, and is currently focused on data management strategies to streamline home energy upgrade programs and technologies to improve home energy performance. Mark Dyan helped found and lead Conservation Services Group from inception to the sale of operations in 2015. An expert in residential energy efficiency program design, he led CSG's business development and new program design department, and he oversaw major residential energy efficiency programs in several states and the province of Quebec for over 30 years of his career. He now works with a variety of organizations on residential energy efficiency and distributed generation policy and program design, and on incorporating residential work into efficiency and carbon reduction plans. So Mark and Dale, thank you for joining us today. With that, Dale, why don't you get us started?
Great, thank you, Amanda. So on the slide, you can see the agenda that we have today. I'm going to just start off with a little introduction about the Home Upgrade Program Accelerator. I'll try to keep it brief. And then we will jump into our main presentation by Mark. And he's going to be talking about the Program Administrator's Dilemma, categorizing costs and program components, improving impact, and a couple different strategies for how to do that. And then questions at the end. Next slide. So let me just tell you a little bit about Better Buildings Accelerators. I oftentimes get questions about what they are, and it's fairly simple. A Better Buildings Accelerator is a collaborative peer-to-peer network designed to facilitate learning and leadership opportunities that result in strategies, practices for clean energy development. These accelerators focus on partner-identified areas that aim to overcome persistent barriers. And the accelerators, there are a variety of them that focus on different topic areas. For example, there's a Clean Energy Low-Income Communities Accelerator, a Home Energy Information Accelerator that focuses on how do we get more home energy information in real estate transactions and the multiple listings. There's a Zero Energy Schools Accelerator, and then the one that I'm working on is Home Energy Upgrade Program Accelerator. And you can learn more about that at betterbuildingsolutioncenter.energy.gov. So that's Better Building Solution Center, one word, .energy.gov if you want to find out more. Next slide. Amanda and I have actually had the pleasure of working with a great group of partners on this Home Upgrade Program Accelerator. Those partners include New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, Arizona Public Service and Foundations for Senior Living in Arizona, Inhabit in Portland, Build It Green in California, NeighborWorks of Western Vermont, Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, the Building Performance Institute, Home Performance Coalition, and Pearl. These partners have been working on reducing the administrative burden and cost of programs by improving processes to manage and track home upgrades, review quality of work, and streamline the collection and management and transfer of data. Many of the strategies that our partners are implementing have had an impact on reducing the burden and cost of the participating contractors. They've also helped to reduce administrative costs for the program. These strategies that they've implemented have included the adoption of common data transfer standards, field guides illustrating critical details for the installation of energy efficiency measures. We published a case study on the Arizona Public Service program and some of the improvements they made last year. We're also working on a couple other case studies of some of our other partners and hope to have those out later this year. Next slide. Our accelerator partners have been making great progress on improving their programs. In this graph, this is from an LB&L, Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory report a couple of years ago, but it looked across several residential programs, several different types of programs, and they tried to quantify the cost of saved energy for those programs. So looking at costs and benefits, the cost of the program and the energy savings. And I just circled one of these, the whole home retrofit programs. I think they're doing really well as far as the cost and benefits, but there's always some room for improvement. And that's what we're really looking at, is how do you identify strategies that help program administrators achieve their goals? And that's what we want to talk about today. Next slide. So from the program administrator's perspective, if I want to achieve more and I want to manage my cost, I'm oftentimes looking at how do I focus my investments of time and funding to achieve more. How do I focus that to improve? And one of the approaches that we've heard from our accelerator partners has been to listen to your contractors and the other stakeholders that and then focus on where the pain points are. So having meetings with them, listening to them, finding out what's not working in the program, and then focusing on those areas to improve. And that's a good strategy, and we've heard that from a lot of programs. In today's webinar, we're going to be looking at another approach that program administrators can also use to help them focus where the investment, to make investments to achieve more in their program. Next slide. Before we jump into the webinar, I do want to just mention to our audience a couple of resources that we offer to help programs to improve and how to achieve more. And a couple of these resources I have on the slide. The first is the Residential Program Solution Center. And this is an online resource where we have a lot of documented, there's case studies, there's examples from other programs, there's lots of program design information. So if somebody's getting started in a new program, there's a lot of good resources, or if a program's wanting to improve, you can find out what other programs have tried, what's worked and what hasn't, that type of thing. Another excellent resource is our Better Buildings Residential Network. And the network hosts peer exchange calls, 4 of them a month, on different residential topics, residential home upgrade program topics. And this is a great opportunity to share best practices and learn from others. So learning from your peers, learning about what they're trying, what they're doing, and what their success has been, as well as what some of the challenges they are. So it's a really good opportunity in those calls to do that. And then we also oftentimes develop case studies on some of those partners and some of their success to encourage others to do the same. So a couple good resources. Next slide. So in the past year, I've been fortunate to work with Mark Dyan. He's, as Amanda mentioned earlier, he's a veteran program administrator with over 30-plus years of experience, and he and I have been collaborating on today's presentation about how program administrators can make an assessment of their program costs and identify where to focus their time and resources to achieve better results. But before I turn it over to Mark, we want to take a quick poll of the audience to see what experience you have managing home upgrade programs. So Amanda, I think you are going to put up a poll and get some feedback from our audience.
Yes. So you will see a poll on the right side of your screen. So the question, we want to know who's in the room. So which of the following best describes your experience managing a residential home upgrade program? A, new or just getting started. B, having worked in, you've worked in a supporting role in one or a few areas of program management. C, some experience limited to a few areas of program management. D, experienced with 5 or more years in multiple areas of program management. Or E, other. Feel free to type anything into the chat or Q&A box. Let's give it one more second. Okay, great. So it looks like let's see, starting at the top, about 30% of you have more than 5 years of experience, and about 15% of you have worked in a supporting role in a couple areas of a program or are new or just getting started. Great. Thank you for participating.
So, hi, this is Mark Dyan. I'm used to being able to see my audience, and all I can see is the screen that you see. So if I go off track, I don't know what to do about that. This analysis comes from the challenge of making major improvements in the cost effectiveness of programs that are being delivered by through ratepayer funds, through utilities, or through taxpayer funds from public entities. It's not primarily aimed at sort of marginal improvements in cost effectiveness of the program. We've tried to frame what the program administrator faces all the time. You've got specific requirements, regulatory reporting. You want to make sure that you're getting the best value for whoever's providing the money for you. And you're doing that in a situation where program designs are different and where the factors that determine how well you're doing change more or less out of your control. So that gives people headaches, as is illustrated here in the next slide. One way to start off is figuring out how would you define program success, and there are many measures. There's savings, there's improvement in customer relations, sometimes building a trade ally network itself is a metric, and almost always meeting some regulatory requirements, which may include non-energy benefits. And there are many measures of these costs, some determined by the regulators and some sort of inherent in the program design. Next slide. We suggest starting with total program costs per lifetime energy savings achieved. We recognize that there's a great deal of controversy over how to measure the savings that a program achieves, and we recommend starting with whatever you're doing now, which almost always is either a deemed savings thing or an estimate from calculation. Those numbers are difficult to verify, but what we're trying to do is get through a measurement approach, which starts from where you are and can get better as you use it over time. Next slide. The advantage of the total savings, the total cost of savings over the savings achieved, is that it's useful to identify where you're spending your program dollars. It's relatively simple to calculate and track on the basis of numbers that you're already tracking. It's applicable across program designs and across jurisdictions, so you can compare how your different programs are doing and how your programs stack up against other people's programs. And because of its simplicity, it facilitates a deeper dive to find areas of improvement. It doesn't, when we say it's diagnostic, not prescriptive, it'll show you how you're spending your money. It won't show you what to do about it. You're going to have to dive in to get that kind of information. And the simplicity of the benchmark means it won't measure everything. So that, at least the way we're describing it, customer satisfaction is not measured at all there. We're just talking about dollars spent per savings achieved. But as long as you're aware of those limits, we think it's a useful tool to begin cross-program and inter-program analysis. Next slide. When you get the overall cost of a program, it tells you which programs are achieving greater results than others, but it doesn't tell you where they are. And it looks at a final output of a program's year or several years, not what causes it. So once you do the overall analysis, which is cost per savings achieved, you have to break it down into program components to see where and how those results are achieved and how they can be improved. Next slide. One way to start with that is to categorize the cost. Programs tend to categorize costs by the categories in which they are billed, which may or may not, which vary from program to program. In some cases, you have basically two categories, administrative costs and incentives. And sometimes there's a third, EM and V. Those are surprisingly not helpful in terms of figuring out what's going on. We're suggesting what is essentially a six-part role, really five: building capacity, acquiring customers, installing the measures, quality assurance and initial verification, evaluation. Those are the components that we think that show up in some form in most programs, and which in some ways which really cannot be done away with, and they end up in verified results. And overall, there's an administrative. You see the bar down the side of that, the graph on the right there. All of these things come with an administrative cost, so that you build a program capacity, you acquire customers, you install saving measures, or you get behavioral change, you do quality assurance and verification, you evaluate your results. All of that comes with an administrative burden. And that framework, which we'll use throughout the discussion, has broad applicability to different program designs. Next slide. But how much shows up in each of these categories varies very much from program to program. These are, if these slides where we don't have any numbers associated with bars, but the proportions are approximately right for the different program designs. A whole home program of the sort that Dale was talking about earlier as a focus spends a fair amount of time on building capacity and customer acquisition and incentives, and then sort of normal amounts on the other parts. Upstream or retail rebate programs tend to have very low capacity building costs, and the cost of a customer acquisition is borne by the retail or upstream partner, not by the utility or by the entity that's running the program. almost all the money goes for incentives. And then in behavioral programs, in some sense, they're a mirror image of upstream and retail programs. Capacity building is relatively low. Customer acquisition is the program, in effect, and there are either little or no incentives, but you have to do a fair amount of evaluation to see whether anything was achieved. These proportions become significant when you try to do major savings, major improvements in energy efficiency, in the efficiency of the program design. Go forward, please. Dale.
Oh, yes. Thanks, Mark. And that was a good introduction to kind of this concept. And you and I had talked about this before the webinar, and we talked about having a simple illustrative example. And that's what I came up with here on this slide is just a simple illustrative example to kind of put in context some of the things that you were talking about. And, you know, I've heard a lot about program administrators have a dashboard, program dashboard, where they kind of monitor what's going on in their program. So that's what I tried to come up with is hypothetically, what would that look like if I'm kind of looking at the metrics that you're talking about, breaking out the cost categories. And so I came up with this simple example. It's just a simple illustrative example, and that's really just the purpose for this slide presentation. But we're going to refer back to this, and I want to tell you a little bit about what's here and explain what's on this slide so we can refer back to it if you have any questions. Anyway, so first you have these orange cells, which I created this. Again, it's just a hypothetical program, but if this was my dashboard, this was my program, these are the inputs for my program. The gray cells are calculated, and so the first place we would start is setting a goal, and Mark mentioned this program administrator cost of lifetime energy saved, and we could do program administrator cost of lifetime, instead of electric, we could do natural gas therm saved instead, but for this simple example, I just used electricity, kilowatts saved. And so that's my goal. I'm not saying that's a good goal or that's a goal for you, but just for this simple example, we're setting it here at 5. Of course, I want it to be lower than what my actual program cost per kilowatt is, and that's over on the right, that's the calculated. And the calculated metric, then it comes from a couple different places. One is obviously the total program cost, which we'll get to in a minute, but there's also the energy saved from the program. And so the way I entered this was an average energy savings, estimated annual energy savings from each customer, then the number of customers, and then an average measured life for those improvements. And so I'm just taking the total of the average energy savings per customer times the number of customers to get over on the right the total kilowatts saved. And then that, of course, goes into the denominator of the cost per kilowatt metric at the top. Again, just a really simple calculation, and we multiply the 2 million kilowatt hours saved times 13 is the measure life to get the denominator for that cost metric. So then the top part is for the program cost. We have the total annual program administrator cost, in this case, for this hypothetical example, 2 million. And then Mark suggests breaking it out into these subcategories that he talked about. And the simplest way I thought of doing that would be just to put a percentage on each of these. As Mark mentioned, you may not be able to, you may not have your accounting system set up where it tracks down to the dollar and cents the accounting for each of these, but you may be able to give a ballpark percentage estimate of what your costs, your costs break out by these subcategories. And so those percentages are just used to break out then that total annual program cost. Over on the right then is where we calculate that and then break out the cost per kilowatt by each of those subcategories. So this is kind of a more of a concrete way of thinking about what Mark just presented, sort of this concept. And two things I'll point out. One is on that cost per lifetime energy savings Mark talked about. For this simple example, we're just using the program administrator costs per lifetime energy saved. Sometimes programs will also include the participant cost, but for this simple example, we just included just program administrator costs. The other is down at the bottom where we had estimated annual kilowatts saved per customer. That's an estimate, and as Mark alluded to earlier, that's going to be an important estimate there, and that factors in, of course, to that metric up at the top, the cost per kilowatt. And experienced program administrators know that you may have your program go for a while, you'll have an evaluation, and the evaluation may say the savings are 40% of what you estimated. So if that were the case here, that would have a big impact on that cost per kilowatt. So some program administrators are starting to look at new methods for getting more real-time estimates of the realized savings from their program, so they have a better idea and be able to track how their programs are performing. So, and those new approaches are sometimes referred to as M&V, or Measurement and Verification 2.0. So that's something just to kind of point out and be aware of. So we'll refer back to this, but I just wanted to talk us through this. We'll come back and maybe use this as an example, but just tries to put in some concrete terms what Mark is kind of talking about. So back to you, Mark.
Next slide, please. I want to spend some time, before I start on this, I want to just talk a little bit about why we said lifetime savings and why we're talking program administrator costs, and then we're going to go through these things. Lifetime savings is important as a metric because if you, some measures save electricity or gas or anything else over a long period of time, some are quick here and gone. If you simply look at first-year savings, which is very convenient, you will be undervaluing the measures that have long-term results and overvaluing those that have quick results, and that will distort your view of what you're achieving. The argument for using the cost of the program rather than the total cost, i.e. the cost of the program and the cost of the participant, flies against most of how program cost effectiveness is calculated, whether it's TRC or any other formula. Here's an argument for this heretical position. In terms of what the benefit to the ratepayers or the taxpayers who are behind your program is, what matters to them is what they're spending, not what the customers who are participating are spending as well. That has broader social implications, but in terms of the value to the people who are paying the bills for the program, it's really their own, their expenditures that come from the incentives or from the other parts of the program rather than what the customers pay to participate. And what using that does is it allows you to see the benefit of programs that encourage customers to pay more and therefore the ratepayers or taxpayers to pay less. If you put them all together in a TRC, that change in program design, which has big impacts on the benefit to the customers and to the ratepayers and taxpayers, gets met. Okay. Definition. Building capacity. Conceptually, this is what's at the beginning of a program. You design a program, you recruit staff for it, you get contractors in to train, to participate in the program, you set program standards and figure out a way to explain them to the participants and so on. In some sense, it doesn't actually happen this way, but in some sense, all of that could be done before you save a kilowatt hour or a therm. And in some sense, it has to be done before that happens. But in fact, it's more of a rolling process, but conceptually, this is the beginning of the program. You define what's in the program, and you get the capacity to deliver savings that you're trying to achieve. Because it happens at the beginning, these costs tend to distort the first months or the first year of any program. A lot of the capacity development will last the life of a program, but most of the costs show up in the first year. So you have to be aware of that when you're determining program cost effectiveness and adjust for it as you go along. As I said earlier, the capacity is in fact continuously rebuilt and it deteriorates if you don't pay attention to it, but the costs tend to be front-loaded and then be less over the course of the lifetime of a program. Next slide. Customer acquisition, this is important, is the process of identifying and convincing a customer to sign up for major savings. So the customer acquisition starts when you start figuring out who you're going to market to, and for each customer ends when they sign on the dotted line somewhere for major savings. Customer acquisition is often a hidden cost and it's dispersed in your accounting, but it turns out in programs, especially in programs that are looking for comprehensive savings, to be a major cost. One of the allures of working in customer acquisition is that we can acquire a customer once and then get them at relatively low cost to participate over and over in the program. You can reduce your cost of acquisition per kilowatt hour saved substantially. Incentives and rebates are what they sound like. Any expenditure that pays for an energy-saving measure or service, including the installation cost. For behavioral programs, this is usually zero. For programs that essentially outsource the incentives, from our point of view, these costs are very low or zero. But it includes a buy down of a loan, it includes a direct incentive, and includes, in our concept, the administration of the incentive and rebate, i.e., the costs of administering the incentives that vary with the number of incentives offered. Next slide. Then there's administration as a pure cost. And what this, in our view, is it's the cost of operating the program in the sense of running the administration, making sure the paperwork or other things process through, and the cost of reporting. You'll sometimes see in some of your programs will say this, that administration includes marketing or customer service or incentives themselves. The more you lump into administration, the less clear the picture becomes as to how you're doing it. So that using a fairly narrow definition of administration identifies where you can make savings or improvements. Quality assurance is the system by which you assure that the measures that you're installing or the equipment you're installing meets program standards and achieves the savings that you're looking for. It includes the cost of on-site inspections, but it also includes the sort of promulgation of the product standards. In some cases, in a retail program, in fact, quality assurance consists of whatever you set up during the capacity development stage as to what products qualify and verification that they've been installed. EM&V is usually a separate item, often usually with a separate contract, to evaluate what has occurred, to measure what's occurred, and to measure what is actually achieved as opposed to projections, and to verify the results. It is often mandated in the program design. Sometimes the amounts you are required or permitted to spend on it is also mandated by regulators, and it is almost always, as I said, a contract with a separate contractor than the program implementation contract. Next slide. So when you are trying to make major changes, major improvements in the program cost effectiveness, start with the strategic questions. Can you reduce cost centers and maintain output? Can you streamline the process to achieve major savings? Can you redesign your program to achieve more savings per customer? Or in this framework, can you redesign your program so that individual customers or partners pick up more of the cost and less is borne by the ratepayers or the taxpayers? And can you attract more customers for the same amount while maintaining the savings per customer? These are strategic questions, and as in most programs, these are the ones that go at the major cost centers where you can achieve savings or improvements in output to improve your cost effectiveness. Next slide. I'm from the Boston area. We had a bank robber here named Willie Sutton who was asked why he robbed banks. It's because that's where the money is. Similarly, although perhaps with better intent, if you want to improve program cost effectiveness, you want to go where the money is in your programs. And while And a lot of times you'll start off on administration and quality assurance because those are costs that seem to everybody to be, you got to have some savings there. But in our experience, while that is important, it turns out that the big money is in incentives, customer acquisition, and capacity building in most programs. Next slide. Yeah.
Okay. So, Mark, just bringing back this illustrative example again and kind of highlighting some of the things that you were just pointing out. So in my example, if this was my hypothetical program, I'm looking at my customer acquisition costs and incentives. That's 75%. So like you were saying, that seems to be, if I follow the money, I need to focus there. And that some of the other areas, I shouldn't avoid them, you were saying, but maybe not as high of a priority. Next slide. And so that really just makes me ask this big question. If my goal is like 5 cents a kilowatt hour, and I'm at 8 cents a kilowatt hour on my program, you know, what do I do next? What do I do next? And I think we talked about maybe doing a poll, maybe like a pre-test, and ask our audience what they think. And then I know you're going to be talking a little bit more about, you know, several different strategies, but let's see what they think.
All right,
Amanda?
So the poll should be showing up on the right side of your screen. So the question is, if your program's total program cost per lifetime energy savings is around 8 cents and you want to get down to 5 cents, how do you do it? How do you start? And so you're able to choose one option. So just choose the option that would kind of be where you would start. So we have a number of ideas that we laid out here, starting with option A, offer less incentive per customer. Option B, increase incentives to encourage measures that achieve more energy savings. C, offer contractors sales and technical training to help them achieve more energy savings per customer. D, spend more money on customer acquisition and marketing. E, change your marketing strategy to get more customers at the same cost. F, redesign your program to make it easier and more streamlined for contractors and customers to participate. And G, develop a long-term customer engagement strategy to get more energy savings from each customer over time. So take a look at these and just select the option that would be where you would start with. And give us a sense of, you know, what would be of interest to you. So give folks another few seconds. I see a few folks who haven't selected an option. So if you would like to, go ahead and select a choice in the poll and submit your decision. Okay. So our top 3 options are, starting with E, change your marketing strategy to get more customers at the same cost, followed very closely by A, offer less incentives per customer, and F, redesign program to make it easier and more streamlined for contractors and customers. Well, it sounds like we have ringers, but I promise we don't. Let's continue with the presentation.
Next slide. So this is a big improvement in cost effectiveness that we're looking for here, right? 3/8, right? We're at, so that's a big number. Mostly, people start when they look at this, where can I cut expenses? And I guess I'm suggesting don't do that. The goal is to improve impact and cost effectiveness. Cutting expenses is one way to do that. Better program design and better marketing may have bigger impacts on cost effectiveness than cutting expenses. Sometimes cutting expenses reduce cost effectiveness. If you built your program around a particular level of incentives, cutting the incentives may reduce participation faster to a greater extent than your savings, than the savings you have from the reduced incentives themselves. If you reduce administrative expenses in a way that increases the time delay for incentive payments, you're going to lose your contractors and the program can shrink on you. So what you want to do is start, especially with a big goal, start by stepping back and looking at the process as a whole, and then focus in on the places where, on the systems that allow your program to improve overall impact. Next slide.
So, Mark, in my hypothetical program then, as you're saying, incentives are my biggest cost, so I guess that means that's where I should start and think about how do I, what are my options then for improving my incentives or changing the design? Is that where I need to look, or what would you recommend?
Yeah, I would start, your big costs here in this program design are customer acquisition and incentives. If you're going to reduce, look at the total, right? If you're going to reduce from 8 cents a kilowatt hour to 5 cents a kilowatt hour, 3 cents a kilowatt hour, 3 cents a kilowatt hour is going to go away somewhere. That is, I should know this number because we've done this before, but it's like $600,000 if you're taking it all out of expenses. That's probably not going to come from administration, being that it's larger than administration or quality management. You're going to have to do something to improve the impact of incentives and customer acquisition to achieve that kind of result. So let's go on to the next slide. Incentives being the biggest item, one thing to do is to think about, can you improve the savings achieved per incentive spent? Now that, obviously, if you can get people to do the same amount of savings for half the incentives, you can save a ton of money that way. But that's difficult, especially if you built the program around a particular incentive level. It's certainly difficult to achieve quickly. There's nothing like a group of people who feel that they've just missed out on a sale because the incentive, the sale price just went down. So one thing to do is to look at the incentives themselves. Are they designed to achieve the program goals, encourage greater depth of savings, or are they more general? For instance, a incentive design that is a certain amount say for an efficient furnace at a particular level, if you have a couple of tiers in that incentive design, you may be able to get contractors to concentrate their efforts on selling the higher impact furnaces or air conditioners or whatever it is that products are going, end up spending the same amount on incentive money, but more of it on higher impact equipment. The cost effectiveness calculations in and of themselves don't give you the answer to this question. They just give you a sense of where to look for it. Moving right along. Next slide. Here's some examples on incentive designs. One of the things we found in other research and people, it's reasonably widely known, that proper installation, especially of refrigerant-based heat pumps or air conditioning system, proper charge and airflow, significantly improve, if you can achieve them, significantly improve the realized results of a particular device being installed. So you have a lot of incentives where they say, and we'll pay, there's a certain incentive for installing a SEER 13 or SEER 15 air conditioner, and we'll pay you more if you get it installed properly. Well, if you think about that as an incentive structure, you may do better to say, we'll pay you the incentive if you get verified charge and airflow. The whole incentive goes with an equipment properly installed. You're going to get a higher percentage of projected savings at the end of the day, and your incentive dollars may stay the same, but the contractors have to deliver more savings per project sold. Similarly, as I said earlier, having tiers for higher rated efficiency equipment or greater achievement in insulation or air sealing will, again, focus your incentive dollars on the high achieving results. One of the things to do that is low cost but has great impact is simplify your design so that a contractor, the contractor sales occur across the kitchen table. A complex design or, heaven forbid, something that says, let me get back to you, the office has to calculate your incentive for you, is a sure way to increase costs and reduce effectiveness. Having your incentives simple, clear, easy to describe, preferably on a laminated card that anybody can look at, turns out to be a significant way of improving savings achieved for the same dollars spent. And finally, one thing that we can take from our friends that market everything else is that having special sales, in effect, boosts participation for the same kind of incentive dollars. We've had success in different programs with off-season specials, a summer extra incentive for doing insulation, which is only going to be beneficial in the winter if you're in the state of Maine, or similar, analogous things in cooling climates. You don't have to change particularly the total amount of incentive spent to make that happen. You basically you change when the incentives are offered, and you get a flood of business, which helps contractors who have an off season, as most contractors do. Next slide.
So, Mark, we talked about the incentives. In my hypothetical example, customer acquisition is my second biggest cost. So I was thinking, how can I improve that? I've got 2,000 customers. I could just increase that, right? So next slide. I was thinking, if I could get that up to 3,100, then I can reach my goal. But I'm not sure. Is that, doable? I mean, is it realistic? And, what are some strategies on how to do that? Next slide.
Next slide. Okay, so this is where we have to go. Improve the effectiveness of customer acquisition. Next. It's a great plan if that you just described, if new customers you get are as good as the old ones you had. You want customers who can benefit from the program and who are willing to buy whatever the program is offering. Effective marketing finds the customers, efficient finds those that can participate, and cost-effective does it cheaply. Getting more customers who shop but don't buy doesn't help. What you want to do, and I think that as you look at marketing and customer acquisition, the question is how effective, efficient, and cost-effective is the marketing and acquisition strategy that you've got? Are you getting the maximum number of customers who can and will benefit from the program for the minimum expenditure? Next slide. One way to look at this is to figure out who are the most valuable customers. And this is a beloved 2x2 chart, beloved by people who are getting MBAs, if no one else. And on the vertical axis, we're getting technical potential. How likely is it the customer to benefit from the whatever the offering of the program is? And on the horizontal axis is how likely they are to buy. And your highest value of customers are the ones in the dark box there. They both have strong technical potential, i.e. their home is inefficient or is old and could benefit from the services that you're offering, and they, for other reasons, in addition to that, have a high propensity to buy whatever services are offered. And conversely, the light box in the lower left corner are people who have low technical potential and low propensity to buy. If your marketing can find your high-value customers or can take the people who have high technical potential but are not, and persuade them to buy when they're not already ready to do that, you can have highly effective marketing for long-term success. If you need quick results, you may want to look at the lower right box where there are people who are willing to participate in the program because they like the idea, because their neighbors have, because of the time of life they're in, i.e. they've just moved into a building, they want to improve it, or there are other things that sort of trigger people buying these services. You may want to get results, a lot of results from them in a hurry, even though they don't have the technical potential that some other places have, simply because they can process through quickly and you don't have to do a lot of persuading. So that kind of this kind of analysis, which people tend not to do, is probably from my point of view, is the basis for figuring out how to make your customer acquisition most cost effective. Next slide. And when you do it, you get maps like this, which show high propensity individuals, and you get you allow yourself to spend your marketing dollars on those customers who are most likely to benefit and most likely to participate, and you significantly improve the cost effectiveness of your marketing, reduce the cost of a kilowatt hour acquired through attracting a customer, and you can have big impact on your program cost effectiveness. Next slide. Another approach, which is extremely popular and which a lot of us who've been in the business have worked on a long time, is to get customers who are going to become repeat customers. We've been pursuing this ideal for you. The idea is that you sign people up and that they, rather than trying to convince somebody to do, $5,000 or $15,000 worth of comprehensive home improvements in one gulp, we get them in on some project that they're interested in, and then we keep talking to them and making them offers for other projects that would improve the overall cost effectiveness, the overall efficiency of their home. But because they are repeat customers, our ability to get back to them at low cost goes way up. So far, this has been a great concept, and at least in my experience, one that has been difficult to achieve results on. Part of that is that everybody involved in the program, except us, doesn't see things this way. Customers, in general, see energy efficiency project as a home improvement project or an emergency repair that they're going to do as a one-off event. And most contractors, until we talk with them, are geared to provide one product or a particular group of services. Retail partners, say a Home Depot, which, from our perspective, look like ideal partners in the sense that they sell insulation and furnaces and air conditioners and weather stripping and windows and all sorts of other energy efficient stuff. And you think, oh, these are the guys or gals who are going to be willing to go back to customers over and over because all those sales are in their already in their big box. They certainly have customer loyalty programs, but from their point of view, whether a customer comes back to buy efficient windows or curtains or paint is irrelevant. They have a range of products that their customer loyalty programs are interested in, and they take some persuading to be focused on these services that we offer. Next slide.
So Mark, we've talked about customer acquisition improving, we talked about incentives. I think I also heard you talk about maybe getting more energy savings per home. So in this, my hypothetical example, we're getting about 1,000 kilowatt hours per customer estimated. But next slide. What if I was able to jump that up to 1,600 kilowatt hours per customer? Then that would get me to my goal. But I guess I'm not sure what I should focus on as far as program cost category to do that. And it seems like contractors would probably play a pretty important role.
Absolutely. And I think that people will find that doing precisely this is maybe the most, in some sense, the easiest and the most effective way of boosting your cost effectiveness, because your customer acquisition costs stay the same. The incentive costs go up a bit because people are doing some more things. But overall, it's a relatively low-cost way of improving the impact of the program. But you're right, the contractors often have to achieve this. So here, the strategic approach is to achieve the savings per upgrade sold. Next slide. A lot of these programs have a site visit at a home energy audit or something of the sort. And one very cheap and very effective way to improve the impact of those things, of those visits, is to maximize savings per visit. It often costs $300 or $400 to get to the door and to stay there for the cost of an audit. And if you break out your costs right, you can see that. That cost means that the additional cost of the materials that are directly installed during an audit is almost trivial. The exception to that, the one that's not trivial now is smart thermostats, but even they tend to cost less than the cost of getting to the door in the first place. And the savings that you achieve during your first visit are there, and they're in the bank, and they occur with almost every visit that you have, whereas the sale of follow-on measures, insulation or a new heating system and so on, are only going to occur with some percentage of the visit. So one thing to do right off the bat with any program where we want to achieve significant cost effectiveness improvement is to boost the number of measures that are installed during the first visit. The other thing to do, obviously, is to get more people that you visit to sign up for follow-on measures. Part of that is what we talked about in customer acquisition already. Before you get to the house, find customers who are likely to benefit and likely to buy, and make sure when you set up a site visit that people understand the purpose of the visit is not to give them free information about their house or even information that they pay for out of their house, which I prefer, i.e. that there ought to be some cost for the audit so you don't have too many tire kickers, but to make sure that the purpose of the audit, the purpose of the home assessment is to help them select the measures that are going to save energy and improve the comfort of their home. One thing that's been done in several programs is if you offer financing, you have people pre-qualify for the financing before you show up. The fact that they go through that process makes them more likely to buy services once you're there. And you want, one thing you'll find is if you're making an offer at the house, the decision maker is not there. You really want to urge people to have a decision maker on site so that when you do your final report on what is being done or what ought to be done in the house, somebody can say yes or no is there, or at least you're in touch with them and you can set up a return call to make sure they make a decision. Next slide. Since in many cases these site visits are done by the contractors and the contractors become the people who are making the sale, if you will, for the energy efficient equipment, you've got to make sure that you have the right contractors working with you and that you're both on the same side of the table, if you will, in terms of making the sale for energy efficiency services. And you also want to have contractors who have the capacity and the interest in promoting the program. So one way to improve your program process is to look at the contractor network and to see if you can you have high-performing contractors and low-performing contractors, and to concentrate your efforts on keeping the high-performing contractors and encouraging similar ones to join. Next slide. This is another matrix, a little bit more complicated, which shows different kinds of contractors. Some contractors, I tended to call them hobbyists, but they're contractors who from the get-go are very high quality. They are building performance specialists. They want to do a whole house assessment. They want to improve the whole building, and they want to do 4 of those a year. If you have a high volume program, these are wonderful people to have on the side of a program, but they're not going to drive your program. You need people, contractors who are willing to do, interested in doing high volume or growing to have high volume, or have, even if they do not know what they're, in a sense, what they're doing. They don't know how to perform well, but they want to build their business and see being a high quality, high efficiency result contractor as the means to growing their business. Those are the people that you want to get into your program and spend your time on. The people that you want to I guess, spend less time on, the contractors, are the ones who are comfortable doing, swapping out boxes or doing a blow-and-go insulation job, and who have a high enough volume that they don't need your program, don't feel they need your program to improve their prospects. You may get volume from them, but you'll spend a huge amount of time on quality assurance and customer complaints. If you spend the time with the contractors who are either already committed to high quality or who can see that being a high quality contractor is key to building a business and they want it to grow, and not all of them do. But those medium quality, high ambition contractors, if you can identify them early and put your time in with them, you'll find that you'll build your program and increase results at relatively low cost. Next slide. Here I've got a couple of things which tend to drop out of the overall program analysis. One thing is that continuity in program design, in incentive design, in program qualification is valuable. It means that you spend your capacity building costs at front and they play out over time. It is always tempting to stop and start your program, or, well, that's not so tempting, but revising the program as you see some new interesting idea is always tempting. It's often a good idea, but it has a cost, because when we change the program design from the center, the contractors, customers who are in the pipeline, partners of other kinds, have to adjust. And that there's always a slowdown when you do that, and you lose some people and you have to find some people. Your capacity building costs come back up, and that tends to hurt program effectiveness. Doesn't mean you can't change your program design. It just means you have to be pretty sure that it's going to be valuable, and you want to do it in a way that is as least disruptive as possible. So continuity itself has a value to program cost effectiveness. Next slide. Another thing that's obvious but sometimes missed is that scale matters. A big program with lots of participants of all kinds, if it's run well, is going to be more cost effective than a similar program that is smaller, simply because the startup costs and some administrative costs, capacity building costs, are fixed and or more or less fixed, and they will, if you spread them over more jobs and more projects, that works out better. That tends to argue for, rather than having 5 different residential or commercial programs, see whether you can consolidate them into 1 or 2 of broadly similar design, and allow, sort of build in the idea of cross-marketing the services and products, rather than creating separate silos which have to be administered separately and which tend to raise costs. If you consolidate things, you can reduce your marketing costs. You can acquire customers for one program and rather easily shift them to another if that's what they're doing, and you can maximize your incentive impact. Next slide. So to review, if you're looking for major savings in the program, you want to step back and look at strategically how you're delivering the program, how you're delivering the savings, and can you do these things, can you achieve major savings in cost centers? Can you streamline the process? Can you redesign the program so that each customer who comes in saves more? Redesign the program or make other modifications in it. Can you design your program so that individual customers will do a larger copay, or partners will take on more of the marketing effort and or indeed some of the incentive costs? And can you attract more customers while maintaining the savings for customers? Those are the big ways to save significant money. I spent a couple hours once working on how to reduce postage in a program, and it turned out, even having achieved the results, that it had no effect, no measurable effect on cost effectiveness of the program. At the same time, figuring out how to get customers who are going to do more per site visit would have 20 times the impact. So again, I believe that's our last slide, my last slide. I think the next one's yours.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mark. I think that's good, and I think we're going to have a little bit of time for some questions. But before we go there, just want to remind everybody about the Residential Program Solutions Center. There's lots of other ideas on how to improve and refine a program, so you can go online and find out more about that. And as Amanda said, I think we're going to try to post these slides and recording online as well. So, and I think before we conclude, we want to do some questions, but also next slide, I think Amanda wanted to do a quick poll, if we have time for that, just to see what our audience is kind of interested in.
Yes. So hopefully you've gotten some good food for thought during this presentation, and we're interested in finding out, what would be useful from us on this general topic area. So what would you find useful as a next step as you look to your program costs and look to how to improve, what areas of your program to improve? So I included a couple ideas here. Option A, a deep dive into calculating your program costs by program component. B, lessons learned on lowering customer acquisition costs. C, successful approaches, lessons learned on increasing energy savings per upgrade. I forgot to update the text on the slide. Okay, let's make D our strategies for engaging partners more, be that your contractor partners or your any other organization partners that you work with. So feel free to just take a second, and if you have any other ideas, feel free to type them in the chat box so we can see if there are ways that we can make this information and these ideas more valuable and usable to you.
And Amanda, if there are any questions, people should enter that in the chat box, and we'll try to respond. Is that the protocol?
Yep. So the Q&A box should be on the right side of your screen, close to the poll box. So feel free to type in any questions or thoughts or impressions on the presentation, and I'll bring them up. So I'm going to close the poll now. So it looks like our front runners are interested in lessons learned on lowering customer acquisition costs, or making customer acquisition more effective, and lessons learned on increasing energy savings per upgrade. Thanks for that feedback. So at this point, we do not have any questions from users, from any folks on the line. If you have any comments or thoughts you would like to share, feel free to type them in. Give folks just another few seconds, and then otherwise I think we might be able to wrap up early. Okay. Well, if you do have any questions or anything, feel free to email me or the WebEx, and we'll definitely follow up with you. So thank you to Dale and Mark for your presentations today. We'll be posting today's presentation and a recording on the Home Upgrade Program Accelerator website, and we'll also send links to you afterwards. So thank you very much for joining us, and this concludes today's webinar. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.